Good afternoon, everyone. That is quarter to four. Welcome at the end of a busy day for you all, I'm sure. We're just about to get started, but before we do, I would invite you just to, if you've not seen the screen already, just have a look at the screen. There, we would ask for you to keep your microphones turned off when you're not speaking and your cameras off. We have a number of presenters with us today who will keep their cameras on. So we're billing our event today as a conversation event. We would really welcome your participation, but I would ask if you do have anything you want to add in, if you just put it into the chat pane and then I'll bring you in. As it says there, just use the chat pane. And if anything goes awry with your technical connection, which is likely to happen to me today, we've had a few issues today, just join us again from the link that you've been sent. And there you can see the hashtag as well for Twitter, hashtag SLF online. So it says at the bottom, enjoy the session. So we hope that you do. My name is Alison Weatherston. I'm Lead Specialist in Education Scotland, working with the Professional Learning and Leadership Directorate, and my main responsibilities currently are around the programmes for the programmes for aspiring and new head teachers, which includes Into Headship, In Headship and Towards Headship. And today we're focusing in on the new, revised, refreshed GTCS Standard for Headship. So we're engaging with that today, and I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Jacqueline Morley from the General Teaching Council. And she and I will talk you through, well, she mostly will talk you through just the background to the new standard, how it came into being, how it differs from the 2012 standard that you might be familiar with, and what sits behind it. But more importantly than that, we're joined with a number of friends and colleagues from across the country who are actually going to illustrate what the standard for headship looks like and feels like as it's enacted in their practice every day in their job as head teachers, local authority colleagues, university leads. And so throughout the event, they'll be speaking and we would like to have some time to interact with you. So we're going to talk really, really fast, so forgive us. But as I said, you're welcome to add anything you wish into the chat pane, and we'll endeavour to bring that into our conversations this afternoon. So I'm going to hand over to Jack, and we will just talk you through the standard. So sit back, relax and enjoy.
Thanks, Alison. I'll have to do the could you move the slides on piece as we go as well. So firstly, I just wanted to frame it in the new standards that came into operation at the 1st of August 2021, and the idea and the concept that frames them around becoming, being and growing as a teacher. And of course, the standard for headship sits in that growthful aspect. And we'll be looking at that in terms of their different uses. And the next slide actually sets that up quite well. Alison, if you could move forward one. So there are multiple uses to all the professional standards, and we've had, I think, professional standards in Scotland now for over 20 years. Traditionally, the standard for provisional full registration are the benchmarks for entry into the profession. But actually, the standards are there to create a shared language for us as teaching professionals, to support us in our career-long professional learning, to develop and enhance teacher professionalism, and to provide frameworks and pathways, for example, for the Into Headship Programme. So if I could show you the next slide, then you'll see that there's a new suite of standards. There are now 5 separate documents. Previously, they were in 3, and they're actually colour-coded, something that teachers said they would find really helpful. And the standard for headship is really for teachers aspiring to or in formal headship roles. Now, leadership, of course, is a fundamental cross-cutting theme, with effective leadership depending on the principles of collegiality, and that all teachers should have the opportunities to be leaders who lead learning for and with all learners. However, the role of head teachers outlined in the standard for headship is about working with and supporting the development of colleagues and other partners in creating learning cultures that promote and support leadership of and for learning, teacher leadership, and working collegially to build leadership capacity in others. So this standard, though leadership is in all of them, this standard has a very strategic responsibility in terms of the growth of that leadership capacity across the profession. If I can take you to the next slide. So the standards are still in the three different areas, and the first section being a teacher in Scotland, and this is the professional values and professional commitment. And I suppose the question we would have would be, what's the leadership role here? Because in terms of acting and behaving, these are just some examples taken from that. Acting and behaving in ways that develop a culture of trust and respect in others and the natural world is certainly one aspect within there, as is promoting health and well-being for self, colleagues, children and young people in my care. But actually the interesting part is the head teachers who lead the whole school community. It's their role in order to establish, sustain and enhance the positive ethos and culture of learning through which every learner, including colleagues, is able to learn effectively and achieve their potential. And head teachers are accountable for developing and supporting an ethos and culture which enables and empowers others to lead effectively with a clear, agreed focus on self-evaluation and improvement. That's taken directly from the Standard for Headship on page 6. Because within this section of being a teacher, in section 1.3, it actually critically sets out what the role is in terms of this for each of the different standards. One of the other changes that I think is useful is the idea of the cross-cutting themes. So Alison, if you could move to the next slide. Here you can see, just in terms of it's section 2, in terms of professional knowledge and understanding, you can see how curriculum and pedagogy is across the suite of standards. Now, on the left-hand side in the benchmark standards, you would have things like having knowledge and understanding of pedagogical theory and professional practice, and in terms of standard for full registration, having depth of knowledge. These are the benchmark ones, but you'll see that the career-long professional learning, standard for middle leadership and standard for headship are here as aspirational standards. And here we actually talk about them having professional illustrations. So these are not an exhaustive list of what it means to be a head teacher, but they're illustrations to guide that professional growth and practice. Interestingly, however, building capacity and capability with colleagues, head teachers need to be familiar and confident in moving across and between the suite of professional standards, enabling colleagues to articulate their professional practice, reflections, and plan next steps in professional learning through these professional frameworks. So whether you're helping support student teachers, probationers, colleagues supporting them, colleagues aspiring to formal leadership roles, aspiring to headship roles, actually one of the roles of the standard for headship or the head teacher is actually have a familiarity to work across and between them. But the next slide is really, and it comes up, Alison, in a number of clicks till all the arrows come up. That's probably the best way. This is part, and there's links to our website as well here. Actually, this is to just reassure you that in the new standard 21, nothing has been lost. Everything that was in the 2012 is still there, but maybe in the sections that are coming up, we're going to draw heavily on section 3, the professional skills and abilities, to exemplify this, but nothing has been lost at all. So you can perhaps see that there is a change in emphasis in terms of, before we would have a separation of curriculum as 2.1 and 2.3 was pedagogical theory and practice, whereas actually it sits now with the curriculum, pedagogy, leadership and strategic vision as an intertwined elements. You can't really separate them out, whereas before it looks slightly divorced from each other. You'll also see that too when we look more closely, I hope, at the professional skills across the curriculum, pedagogy, leadership and strategic vision. However, the next slide is a way of maybe, now I'm aware you won't be able to read this, but on our website there's a hyperlink at the top for the slides which will be shared. This will take you to this. There are coaching wheels to help explore all of the standards, but this is the one that supports the standard for headship. So at the very top, it talks about lead, model and support the professional values and the professional commitment. This is the piece I was talking about at the start. If you looked at 5 o'clock, which is the one we're going to go and have a look at, it's about having enhanced and critically informed understanding of the curriculum and lead and support collaboratively in developing content, pedagogy, assessment and provision. And I'll speak about that in more detail. If you were to look at 7 o'clock, another one I will draw out as an example here is the idea of critically engage with policy, research and practice to model, establish and promote collaborative culture of professional learning. And that critically engage is something that Alison's going to touch on shortly as well. So if I actually take on to the next slide, which shows you the example of section 3.1, on the left-hand side, you've got what was previously in the 2012 standard, where we talked about the professional actions of a head teacher being around consistent high-quality teaching and learning for all learners. You'll see in the new standards, this is framed under professional illustrations, but the standard itself says that teachers lead and work collaboratively with the learning community to design and build the curriculum, i.e. through the practices that take place in learning communities in developing content, pedagogy, assessment and provision as educational programmes are planned, enacted and evaluated. So it's that interconnectivity between all of those that are part of that designing and building the curriculum. The next bullet points we'll have a look at in more detail to have a look how they're expanded on. So Alison, if you could move on to the very I'm going to use the professional learning one. So in professional learning 3.3, it talks about head teachers here establishing and promoting a collaborative culture of professional learning with and beyond the school and the wider learning community. And that you saw reflected on the self-evaluation wheel. In terms of what we would refer to as 3.3.1 and 3.3.2, that kind of language, it talks about the role in co-creating and leading a culture which promotes and sustains career-long professional learning across the school and learning community. And I will look at the illustrations in a moment that go with that. And it also talks about ensuring and enable and sustain approaches and processes which support engagement with critically reflective practice as an integral part of career-long professional learning and the professional learning culture of the school and learning community. And it also positions the head teacher within a role as a model there. So if we were to look in more detail at those, Alison, I think the next slide actually puts that out. So if you were to look, for example, at what it says about the illustrations in terms of that 3.3.1. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. It talks about the head teachers taking responsibility for and engaging actively in career-long professional learning to deepen their knowledge, understanding and skills. So being the lead learner in that sense. It also talks about things like developing and engaging in professional inquiry as a key element of a sustainable professional learning culture. So while leading a culture that has that inquiry stance, it's done through modelling the inquiry that the head teacher is perhaps undertaking as well and sharing that with colleagues. If I was to show you the next example, Alison, which takes out the 3.3.2, and that's the one we talked about in terms of enable, sustain the approaches and process which is support this. It talks about the head teacher using agreed processes which identify strengths and development needs to support career-long professional learning. And it also talks about it being part of that, using, for the first time actually within this, it talks about establish, enable and sustain coaching and mentoring principles and approaches to support professional learning, including the PRD process. Now that coaching wasn't mentioned previously at all within the 2012 professional standard. So you can see that change in emphasis that has come about. Alison, I think that may take us to the last slide. And I think Martine couldn't be with us today because she had a clash in her diary, but I think I would use her voice probably to illustrate what's new, how the 2021 standards are different. And she actually talks about them illustrating the complexities of leadership within the current climate in which we're working, and that there's a strong emphasis on the strategic vision and the role of the school leader in empowering others to influence change. She talks about the importance of relationships with all stakeholders and it being embedded in all three sections of the standard of headship, and recognises the importance of educators designing a curriculum to meet the needs of the community in which they serve. She also talks about that significant emphasis now on pedagogical leadership throughout. As school leaders, she says that we must be confident to discuss pedagogy, policy and practice to ensure that we can achieve the best possible outcomes for our children and young people. And I think her words really do capture very effectively the change in emphasis that the new standard for headship brings in 2021. Alison, is there anything else I can add there, or hopefully I'm still on time for you?
Thank you very much, Jack. Thank you for taking us through some of those key changes and emphasis. Jack and I were both involved in some of the writing of the standards, which came about after some extensive consultation right across the system in Scotland. And I think for all of the standards, as they were refreshed and reviewed, it was important to really get a sense of what that looks like in real life, so that it wasn't a set of standards that people were not referring to, but actually something that's enacted in their daily lives. And so I think that just brings us to the point where we thought it was important in looking at the new standards and that new emphasis that we bring in some real voices of head teachers who are working with the standards, who are using them to reflect against their practice. But also you'll hear from what they talk about this afternoon is how they embody that, how they use the wider learning community, how they engage with children, families, partners across their learning communities in terms of all aspects of those professional skills and abilities. So we are focusing in on that third section, professional skills and abilities. And I'm going to invite colleagues shortly just to talk us through each of those in turn. You'll see the overarching statement, and then they will provide their own illustrations of what that might look like. As before, would welcome your comments, questions, queries in the chat pane as they're going through them, and we'll do our best to cover some of that. So I'm going to invite Angela to join us. So Angela and Pam also, who's with us this afternoon, between them are going to look at 3.1 and 3.2. Pam was actually covering both, but Angela's going to take a holistic view of how she's used the standard in that transition period of becoming a new head teacher, but becoming a new head teacher in the current challenges of working within the pandemic. So I'm going to hand over to Angela now to share her story. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. So my name's Angela Burnett, and I am currently the head teacher at St Mary's Primary School in Leith in Edinburgh. And I've been head teacher for 6 months now, and really it was the successful completion of the Into Headship course that has led to me sitting in that chair today. Without that, I wouldn't have had the confidence to do it, so I can highly recommend it. So I guess what I've been asking myself is, like Alison said, is how do I embody the standard for headship in what I do in my day-to-day practice? And how can I use it actually, excuse me, to fuel my actions as a leader in school? I think it's really easy to become too focused on the management side of things, particularly just now during the global pandemic, running the school, focusing on health and well-being, focusing on all the systems and how we have to follow procedures and policies. But by taking time out to reflect on the standard and really think about how I've got from the 1st of March to today successfully, what's really shone through for me is that it's the professional values and professional commitment to what I do that has got me here today. And I realised that because the professional values are so closely aligned to my own personal values, that every situation in terms of management that I've been faced with, I have used those as opportunities to show what those professional values are and to show who I am as a leader. From things like cleaning the jelly up from the dining hall floor to dealing with child protection matters as well. Always trying to model what it is that I want to see in my stakeholders in my community. The last 6 months, I've really had to focus on building and fostering positive relationships, and making those connections has been more challenging for us all, as we know. And I've really had to try and focus on promoting the health and well-being of my school community. So by developing and focusing on those relationships, I feel I've helped to develop myself and show my authenticity as a leader, which I think is really important, and really set out my stall to say this is what I believe in and what I think is really important. And keeping children's rights at the forefront of my decision making, and building that climate of trust and respect that we've spoken about already. Always trying to demonstrate kindness and integrity in my decision making as well. So it says in the standard that upholding the professional values of social justice, trust, respect and integrity requires a commitment to leadership that inspires confidence and encourages aspiration. I believe that I need those values as much as I need to be able to demonstrate them in my daily practice. And it made me think a bit about the chicken and egg scenario of which came first. So do I start with trying to prove that I can meet the standard, or do I start with the standard to fuel me and my actions as a leader? So suppose what I'm trying to say is that I think you become the standard in your efforts to be a successful leader. And when you are doubting yourself, the standard reminds you of who you are. I confess, Jack and Alison, that since starting 6 months ago, I haven't found much time to keep reflecting on the standard. However, when I did in preparation for today, it's really reassured me to see that I am demonstrating so much of the standard through my daily interactions, and have learned to use, as I said, all those management requirements that I'm faced with to demonstrate my personal and professional values. Very much see myself as a lead learner rather than a head teacher, and I think showing that to my learning community is really important, and all that comes with being a learner, that it's messy and that I'm not always going to get it right, but actually we should be making those decisions together and work collaboratively as a school community. I wholeheartedly recommend the Into Headship course. As I've said, without it, I wouldn't have been here today. And it really has helped me to reflect during situations that maybe aren't going the way I would have anticipated. And it's given me the chance to look back at what I learned during the course, and have that critical understanding of the concepts of leadership and management has really helped me to feel comfortable with what I'm doing and think, actually, I've read about that, so that's fine. What I'm seeing is okay. It's in the leadership books. It must be normal. So that's been really helpful. I think also that by committing to my own professional development and ensuring that I engage fully with the standard for headship, that I've shown myself the respect that I deserve to make myself the best leader that I can be. And I would really recommend that you do use the standard to support you on your learning journey. 3.2 has really been a natural focus for me in terms of developing a shared aspirational vision over the past 6 months, underpinned by those positive relationships, and asking ourselves together as a learning community, what are we going to do and how are we going to get there, and making sure that everybody's views are taken on board. I was just to finish off thinking that you could compare the standard for headship a little bit to holding a driver's license, that you've demonstrated the basics and have achieved the standard. However, now I've really got to learn to drive and really move the school forward as a leader. However, although the driver's license permits you to do it, it doesn't provide you with a constant reference point like the standard for headship does. And it gives you that confidence boost to remind yourself of what you're achieving, particularly in difficult times. So when your leadership is driving a school forward, you need the standard for headship, but the standard for headship also needs you. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Angela. Very well put. And we're going to hear later from Rosemary Grady, who is course lead for Into Headship at University of Edinburgh, and she'll talk a bit more about that. And you'll hear from what Jack has said and Angela has said, the criticality that comes through in terms of the learning that's important leading towards the standard for headship on Into Headship. And nice to hear that interaction between the two. And also, I think, Angela, to acknowledge that management is part of it too. You can't really separate them out. So thank you for that very honest and heartwarming version of your story. I'm now delighted to pass over to Pam Davey, who is going to talk about both 3.1 and 3.2 as a new head teacher as well. Pam.
Hi everyone, thank you Alison. So my name is Pam Davey and I am currently head teacher of Auchmuty High School in Glenrothes in Fife. I was on Into Headship cohort 5 as well in session 1920, and then did an acting headship at Glenrothes prior to taking up this post. So I suppose it's kind of my second year, but actually my first year in this permanent post. And I would just like to mirror what Angela says about the Into Headship course really being a really integral stepping stone for me in terms of really recognising who I am as a leader, understanding the kind of person, not just leader I want to be, but human being that I want to be moving forward, and the role model that I really want to be for the young people. And I really loved Angela's driving licence analogy. It's probably quite good. But also I think it's about when you become a parent for the first time, people try and tell you what it's going to be like and you kind of imagine it, but until you're in the seat and until you're doing it yourself, you go, ah, right, now I see. So it's been a real learning curve for me. So just in terms of 3.1 and 3.2, which is obviously around the curriculum, pedagogy, leadership and strategic vision, and also the learning context. When I reflect upon this against the standard, I see my role within this really as leading and working collaboratively to establish a culture that really provides opportunity and equity for all young people, which is what Jacqueline was saying at the beginning too. And I think at the moment, particularly in a new school, I see myself doing this in kind of 3 ways. So the first one is really modelling and enacting the vision of the school, which in Auchmuty centres around ambition and equity, and also around our values, which you can see at the bottom of my screen here. And really, in terms of me doing that as a head teacher, at the moment, I feel it's really about me enacting that and embodying that in every conversation and every interaction that I have. As we've heard, we're the lead learners, we're under the microscope, people look to us how they want the school, how the school to be, and I am the lead learner, and really ensuring that those conversations that I have with all young people, but also parents and carers, staff and members of the extended community, mirror those values that we want to see all of the time to really create that positive ethos. And then ensuring that the learning and teaching practices and the curriculum within the school reflect our values, and that our young people are constantly reminded that they can be anything they want to be, provided that they work hard and believe in who they are as young people. And again, as Jacqueline was saying earlier, ensuring that teachers are provided with the time and space that they need to work collaboratively with their colleagues to ensure high quality learning and teaching for all of our young people within the school. I think it also involves knowing our young people well. I think that's so important in getting it right for them, and modelling and promoting these real positive relationships, and not just with the pupils, but also with their families. And the more you get to know them, the more you can help them, support them and ensure the correct pathways throughout their school career. One of the things that we're focusing on very strongly at the moment within Auchmuty is really using all data available to us to identify the individual pupil need within the school, and not just attainment data, but also SIMD data, free school meal data, wider achievement information, and all of that's used to just ensure that course choice is effective. We've got the young people in the right classes at the right times, and throughout transition points, ensuring that the correct learner pathways are identified for them, and remembering that learner pathways are not always the same as subject pathways. And if we know the young people, we can get them into the right courses at the right time and do what's best for them. And this then really leads into the curriculum, again making sure that those progression routes are right, and working with the staff across the school to really whittle down into what do the young people need within the different subject areas and within faculties. And again, reminding everyone all of the time, taking us back to our values, that an equity is not about everybody being equal, but ensuring that everyone has the bespoke tools required for them to realise their full potential. Opportunities for learner participation is a very big thing for us just now. The young people and hearing their voice and what they want to see in their learning, and how good is our school parts 1 and 2, and the learner participation in educational settings 3 to 18 really form the basis of what we're doing around this session, and giving young people the opportunity to inform whole school improvements and have a say in their learning, and also the curriculum that's offered to them to really enhance that learning context. And then finally, that opportunity for parental engagement, really bringing in, and COVID, if it's give us any good stuff, it's given us the opportunity to reach out to families remotely. And I think there is real opportunity there, and we're really trying to grab that with both hands and keep that going, and ensuring that all your parents and carers and members of the extended community are aware of the wide range of learner pathways that we have now. They're so wide, so vast, and it's really about educating them to make sure that we can work together to get the best pathways for our young people, not just through school, but also beyond school as well. And again, providing the families with the tools that they need to support their young people in all that we're trying to achieve as well. So that's really a snapshot of where we are at the moment, Auchmuty, and happy to take any questions later on if there might be any. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. And I think what I'm reflecting on already from both Angela and Pam is how you can't really separate out some of these illustrations. There's so many aspects of the standards are just woven through. I heard very strong sense of values coming through there from Pam. So while we're focusing in on particular illustrations, really the whole standard gets articulated in so many aspects of your role. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to stop talking and hand over to Colin Meikle, who has he's going to focus in on the 3.3, which is professional learning, and also a previous Into Headship participant who's spoken at a number of events, and he's going to talk about how he supports others learning using the standard.
Great, nice to see everybody today. As Alison said, my name is Colin Meikle. I'm currently head teacher at Craigmount High School in Edinburgh and was part of cohort 4 for Into Headship in 1819 and did an acting role before starting in Craigmount just in February of this year, so still relatively new to the school. And as Jack has already spoken about, I suppose there's so many aspects to professional learning and to leadership within this area. So I'm going to focus on what it means for me personally and one aspect of leadership that we've started taking forward in the school and how I hope to see that as providing the opportunity or the grassroots to serve other aspects of leadership in the school as well. So first of all, on a personal note, I would say that the standard for headship, both the previous one from 2012 and now this refreshed standard, has been an absolute benchmark for my own professional learning. It's been something that I, as both we've already spoken about this afternoon, actively engage with as part of my own PRD process. And also, I find it really supportive as I plan my own learning, especially as a new head teacher in my first permanent post. And as part of my own professional learning, I have continued to work with the University of Stirling as an associate tutor in their MSc programme, which I absolutely find professionally rewarding, as I'm able to engage with practitioners across the country as they engage with critical collaborative professional inquiry. And I suppose even the words that are in the critical collaborative professional inquiry embodies the standards with the idea, with the notion of it being critical and collaborative. And I think that allows me to be able to see as I learn and as I look at leading in a school, the journey that others are on and support them to do that as well and bring aspects of good practice, link people in school with aspects of good practice across the country. But certainly from a school perspective, and just one of the areas within professional learning that I've been focused on is my firm belief in the aspect of middle leadership within the school. And I feel that it's my responsibility, as it is outlined in the standard, to shape the culture that we have in the school, which allows professional learning to thrive, sorry. So one of the areas, as I said, I've been looking at since starting in February is the role of middle leaders, as they're the engine room of the school. I've been working closely with staff, but these middle leaders have their feet very firmly in a secondary school in the day-to-day practice, but also in aspects of whole school leadership as well. So the first thing we did was, before the summer holidays, was give them space and time to evaluate their role in the school against the standard for middle leadership, while I was simultaneously looking at the standard for headship as well. Where were the middle leaders really empowered to take things forward in the school and to live the standard for middle leadership? And where, if anywhere, were the blockages in the school or things in the system which were stalling progress? And as a result of that, we've been able to look at 4 key aspects to take forward. First of all, about providing more time for middle leaders. And I know one of the things we always talk about is time, but middle leaders here only had 3 additional non-contact periods, and they really weren't able to get to aspects of their strategic role. So providing time for them. Then really focusing on what does the difference between management and leadership look like at that level. Having dedicated time for them for their learning, whether that's through 2 of them are working on an MSc, whether that's whole school leadership opportunities, or whether that's opportunities for their own professional learning. We use Vibe through Tree of Knowledge, which is GTCS accredited, and middle leaders have been taking part in that as they look at inquiry-based learning in a school setting. And then also finally developing the strategic role of the deputies and working collaboratively with the extended leadership team to move away from a lot of operational meetings to having more of a strategic focus in meetings as well. And really just making sure that we're embodying what is there in the standard for headship, about making sure that the quality of those discussions is there so that we can grow leadership capacity at all levels through teachers into the ELT, into SLT, that we've got coaching approaches, and which in turn has an impact on pupils and the wider community. So I suppose it is our intention this session to reflect on that, to look at again how the standard for middle leadership, how that reflects with my role in the standard for headship, what is our learning community like? What have we learned this year? Where are we all working within the standards? Knowing that leadership is messy. So where have we learned, and what can we take forward? And I think when I was reflecting on this, it really took me back just at the weekend, and for anybody who's in Edinburgh, we had a long weekend this weekend. I was away kayaking on Saturday, and I don't know the last time I was in a kayak, to be honest. I think it was late teens, early 20s. And when I first got in, I have to say that once I started, I ended up going round in circles and absolutely getting nowhere. But after that, I managed to find a bit of my stride. I felt like I was finding success, but then I capsized at one point as well. So I found myself in the water in the middle of a loch, and I had to then get myself to the side, empty the water out and get back in again. And I suppose what I've seen through the standards is really I see them as a suite of documents which really can be used in that interconnected way to help guide you, so that when you do find yourself going round in circles, or when you do find yourself capsizing in the middle of the water, that you can actually use them as an anchor point to dust yourself off and get going again in a certain direction. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Colin. So, colleagues, I hope you'll join with me in thanking our head teachers for their very honest discussion there of the role and very clear vision there of how the standards are supporting them in all aspects of their work. Just a wee shift of emphasis now. Unfortunately, this afternoon, our next speaker, Michael, wasn't able to join us, and he was going to speak about self-evaluation. But so I'm using this opportunity just to hone in on that last sentence there, because we've heard colleagues in the rooms talk about criticality. Rosemary's going to speak a little bit about the Into Headship Programme, which is based on, or at the core of it, is that looking at pieces of academic research, at policy papers, at practice, and really engaging critically with that and developing your own stance towards that. And I think that's another feature of the new standard, is that it's repeated throughout each of the professional skills and abilities. Because what we know from the Into Headship Programme, and I'm just going to illustrate this with the voice of some previous participants, and it's very small, so I'm going to read it out, is the influence of that and the difference that makes to their practice, being able to critically examine situations that they're in and fall back on some of their own learning in order to support them. So, for example, this first one, I now have a much more detailed understanding of education policy and of leadership, backed up by my academic reading. The programme strengthened my existing skills and allowed me to focus on areas of development. That's a bit small. Developing greater understanding of the standards, being able to engage in high-level strategic discussions. Apologies, my screen is too small for me. I'm going to try and change that view. Sorry. There we go. Developing greater understanding of the standards, being able to engage in high-level strategic discourse amongst knowledgeable and experienced colleagues, as well as the opportunity to appreciate what's really important in headship, all enables quicker and more effective decision-making on every area in headship. The learning hasn't stopped, but the foundations were put in place. And finally, another example, since participating in the programme, I'm more reflective and have a deeper knowledge and understanding of policy and research. I will explore the why, so I have a clear rationale and evidence for the need for change. This has allowed me to be more confident with the staff team and get the buy-in to initiate effective change. And we've heard that very clearly today from our colleagues. It's around just being able to, we've heard people tell us time and again that being on the Into Headship Programme can be challenging from a time point of view. You've also heard colleagues talk about finding the time and the space, but actually the difference that makes in their strategic decision making and having those challenging conversations, or just knowing they're doing the right thing, has been incredibly supportive. And so finally, in looking at the standards, 3.5, I'm going to talk about 3.5 along with my colleagues from local authorities. And all I'm going to say is this is around resources, and resources include staff, it includes the people you work with. And it's also about managing the money. So some of 3.5 is that management operational responsibility and the legislative duties of a head teacher. And we cover that on the Into Headship Programme through Education Scotland online modules that focus in on some of the key legislative aspects. So, for example, the Equality Act in terms of employment, but also in terms of working with children and families. UNCRC is covered, child protection is covered, health and safety. that comes into the Into Headship programme, covers that in 3.5, but key to this is also our local authority colleagues who support participants onto the programme, and then they support them as they become head teachers through induction programmes, etc. So very quick word from Ian and Helen, both of whom sit on the National Design Group for the Into Headship programme and are very experienced colleagues within local authorities. So I'm going to hand over to Ian. Rosemary, I hope you're getting your fast speaking teeth in there while you're waiting.
Thanks, Alison. Yes, my role within West Lothian, I work with the local authority. I am a head teacher, so I am a real person as well. However, I do work with the local authority. It's a great privilege. My role is Senior Professional Learning Officer, and I've worked with, I think, the previous 4 or 5 cohorts of Into Headship, and it's great because I get to see, and it was great hearing Colin talk about middle leadership, because I get to see people coming through those journeys from kind of prior to the Into Headship and then beyond. And as Alison says, 3.5 often introduces that kind of unfamiliarity. You know, it was great listening to Pam and Angela talking about the kind of driving license, because you've got the driving license, and in some ways you're then on this road, but there's so many things that you just don't know are going to come up. And often a lot of those are around aspects of the kind of strategic and the operational priorities. So certainly, you know, I have that great privilege of supporting people through that. But we often provide, I suppose, the kind of meat on the bones. Alison's talking about these modules, you know, within the Into Headship programme. We then kind of continue that on by providing that ongoing support within our local authority. So we provide professional learning opportunities, networking opportunities to meet with key personnel around finance, around HR, around child protection, so that people can actually, as I suppose they're driving along, have got those key people that can signpost them. And we also work within that kind of premise as well, that we don't expect our head teachers to know everything all the time, but we want them to know who to go, where the signposts are. There's another driving analogy, I didn't mean that one, but where where we can signpost people to for that support, because we look at it as a real culture of collective responsibility. And that opportunity for our head teachers to kind of work with each other, support each other, with a mentoring programme for new and acting head teachers as well, so that people feel that they've got that kind of ongoing learning journey as a school leader. I had lots of other wee sticky notes, but I think I'm maybe going to pass over to Helen now, given the time. Helen.
Hi folks. I'm very mindful that we've not heard from the university perspective, and I suppose from a local authority perspective, I'm very similar to Ian in that I'm really trying to promote that collective collaboration within schools and support our head teachers with that from the central role out, through a range of professional learning opportunities for staff at all levels, right through from probationers right through until the head teachers. And we work with our university links like Rosemary, Valerie, Stirling, that some of you are still working with. So we work together, and hopefully collaboratively we get the support and that's underpinned by the standards. But I'm mindful, Alison, that I think we're going to get clicked out, so I'm going to pass you back to Rosemary if she's got any time.
Thank you. I'm going to pass straight over to Rosemary as well.
Thanks, folks. I will absolutely summarise and cut what I was going to say, but actually it's probably just recurring themes that were all spoken about. Obviously, Into Headship, right at the core and central to Into Headship, is the awarding of the standard for headship. That happens before you come on the programme, when you're thinking about, is this the right time for me? It happens during, in relation to all the tasks and activities, reflecting on your ESCE, getting feedback and perspective of others. And right at the end of the process, which is where we are with our current folks, around the PV process and how we collectively come to the decision around awarding the standard. We've heard analogies from Colin about kayaking or professional development, might feel like that. Pam about, becoming a parent for the first time, and the driver's license from Angela. And I suppose just to draw it all together, I read a very early professional development text from 1998, remember that? Just recently, and it depicted our professional development as starting off with initiation, survival and experimentation, right through to, in our senior roles, as stabilisation, mastery, and wait for this, serenity. I don't know if any of us have met that apex of serenity yet, but in the last 18 months, I'm sure that we've all felt that maybe not quite serene, and we can all safely say, as many folk have said, that actually our learning and development is messy, it's iterative. You might start feeling that you're going right back to the beginning of learning some things, and other times you bring together all your experiences to face the challenges that you're faced with. I think that the Standard for Headship gives us a shared understanding, a way to communicate that as we develop as people, rightly, as Pam said, as human beings. We're not the finished article, and awarding the Standard for Headship means exactly that. We're not done, we're not finished there, we're just swimming in those waters, and the ink is never dry on that Standard for Headship. So hopefully that will reiterate with some of the themes that we've heard from our colleagues in the field today, as we continually construct, deconstruct and reconstruct our knowledge and understanding of what it means to be a school leader in Scotland in 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosemary. I can't really follow that. Absolutely encapsulated everything. So thank you for joining us today. I've put my email address into the chat pane. If you do have any questions, very happy to answer them. I'm also going to stay here for a wee bit. I'm very conscious you'll be going on to other sessions, but if anyone would like to ask a question, I'll stay here for 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you so much to all of my presenters today. It's been really lovely just to hear from real live head teachers what it actually looks like in practice, and thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving up your time today to prepare for today, so thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon. And I'm just staying here, so if anyone wants to ask anything, I'll be here.
Alison, I'll pair you here. I'll stay as well.
Thanks everyone, that was great. We're always looking for case studies, just saying.
The case studies were great. It was just a pity that there wasn't time to stop and have, but that's the nature of the beast. There could have been some great conversations around some of the case studies, I think.
And I think yeah, we know we used past participants at the conference last week, but I think it'd be great if we could do more of that at the next conference in March, because I think people really appreciate not just hearing about the focus in the conferences. Thank you, Kate, if you're still there. Well done, thank you, Kate. Sometimes it's about the programme, but actually what was really powerful today was the standard, and maybe we should focus more on that in our conferences. So I know people at the start want to know about the programme and how they're going to get through, but actually that was just really powerful today. I thought it was fantastic. So thank you. That's nice. Kenny, if you're there and you want to put your camera on and come in to speak with us, we'd be very happy to chat with you. If you're still there. Kenny Collins. Are you there?
Hi there, everyone. Sorry, I'm still here. This is Kenny here. I put a wee comment in there, but I'm actually at home at the moment, unwell with COVID. So my camera's off for a very specific reason. It's not a pretty sight here at all.
That's right.
So I hope you can forgive me. But yeah, it was really it's definitely a path that I'm looking to go down myself. But I know that the panel may seem quite daunting and a bit of a grueling prospect, but it's really just to ask everybody how they found that and how they prepared and what advice you could offer if you have any.
Are you in a local authority, Kenny?
No, it's an independent school.
That's good then, because my local authority colleagues can tell you lots of advice because they won't interview you. Any advice, folks?
Hi,
Anybody?
Kenny, it's Ian from West Lothian. Hi. Do you know, the biggest thing I would probably say, and it's maybe a bit flippant sounding, be yourself. I mean, that is the absolute most important thing, because it's very, very easy to kind of build a narrative around the standard of what you think a panel wants to hear. But actually, what I often say to prospective applicants is, on paper, you've done enough to merit an interview. How are you going to make yourself stand out from the rest of the crowd? And a lot of that comes down to individualism, what you can bring to the role, how you can bring the role of a head teacher alive in your own context, and what your own skills are, and your attributes. And I think, more than anything else, don't try and second guess what the panel are looking for, because the panel will be looking for that individualism. And I would always say that to people who are looking to apply.
Yep, I would agree with Ian. It's Helen Cassidy here from East Ayrshire. I suppose really making sure that it's evident that you've reflected against the standards, and it's not just been a tick box, how you've reflected against the standards in the past, how that has changed or mapped out, your practice, and what impact it's had on the young people. I'm always very keen to hear about what difference has it made, what journey are you on, how have you worked collaboratively with others. It's not solely about you, so it really is, as Ian said, it's about your experience. And if you're an aspiring head teacher at the moment, I would imagine you're embedding practitioner inquiry, Kenny, that you're looking at different aspects of learning, that you're promoting the standards for other people in your schools. We heard today about the middle leadership and the emphasis there. So it's reflecting against what you're doing in your current role, and what difference that has made to that learning community that you're in. And that's what we want to hear, that you are going to be a leader that can take people with you. It's not always about I did. It's about that learning journey, how you built capacity across your school, and hearing that holistic development and contribution that you make to the school. It's not just about that one-off, I did this and I ran this or whatever, so it really is the starting point, I would say, before you get to that panel, is to really have a good reflection and an honest critical reflection against the standard, and that will derive whether it's the right time for you to apply, whether you're there, or you have to have a conversation with your current head teacher to say, I'm on this journey, and here's what I'm aspiring to be, and here's what I should be moving forward. But it has to be, you have to be true to yourself and true to the experience that you've had, and bring that to the table. And most times that will impress people, and what leadership journey you've had to that point. So take that all with you on the day. But it's very much not an interview, it's about your experience. I would always say I want to hear about people's experience and the difference it's made. So it's not something you have to newly learn or recite or whatever. It should come naturally to you whenever you come into that conversation, and we always mute it as a professional conversation. It's not an interview. We try and make it quite relaxed, but it is a professional conversation about your leadership development and how you can evidence that you're at that next step in your journey, Kenny.
Brilliant, thank you very much. That's been really helpful, everyone. Thank you.
Kenny, sorry, Alison.
I was just going to say, sometimes the challenge for the independent sector and the panel, so we host, it's not ourselves, but we host the independent panel, and the same criteria applies, as you would expect. That's exactly what they're looking for. Helen's put it really, really well. But I think the challenge sometimes in the independent sector is some of those structures. So it's whether you have the opportunity to do that leading. I know, some of the promotional structures and the roles that you have might be of slightly different to what we would expect in a local authority school. So it's just making sure you have the opportunities to do that leading across the school and with the wider community, and being able to speak about that. Sometimes colleagues from particularly the smaller independent schools don't necessarily have that experience yet because they haven't had the opportunities. So it's just seeking out the right opportunities. And sorry, Colin, I interrupted you.
No, at all. I'm not going to add much more to that. I just want to say that I would echo what they say, and from a non-local authority perspective, when I was thinking about starting my journey, and I won't go into this, but I accidentally started a master's. I won't go into that story, but as part of the master's, when I was looking at it at Stirling, that you could do Into Headship as part of the second year. And I suppose I, at one point, nearly artificially applied for it because it it was part of the journey. And at that point, I did exactly what's been said there. I took the time to reflect, where was I in my leadership journey? Did I feel I'd had enough impact in my deputy role at the time? And I didn't feel I had, and therefore I made the decision not to apply, and then went through and actually completed the Masters and then did Into Headship as a 4th year at the end of it. But that was about, exactly as everybody said there, deciding for me that that time wasn't right, and making the decision that I wanted to do another path. So I think that whole, I'm not really adding to what we said there, but I think just to give you a personal perspective that it's okay to say this is not the right time, and you know, I'll come back to it when it is the right time for me, and I did, but later on.
Thanks, Colin. That was really useful as well. So I think what we're saying, Kenny, is a really good self-reflection against the standard, and see where you're at when you've done that, and look for the opportunities within your role.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Listen, thank you so much for making that wee bit of extra time, everyone, and it was great to hear from you.
Get well soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Our other presenter is in the same boat as you. Michael couldn't come for the same reason, so take care.
Okay, take care. Thanks again. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks,
Kenny. Bye-bye. And we have a question from Pora from Finland, and Jack's just actually typed exactly, well, more or less what I was going to do, Pora. So yes, the frameworks are different. And Jack's put the link to the inspection framework, or the quality indicators used for inspection in schools. However, our inspector colleagues would expect that teachers were meeting the professional standards. And just as you've heard this afternoon, that the way that they are going about their work, how they are engaging with their wider community, how they're engaging with colleagues, they would expect the standards to be visible in how people are as a professional, albeit there are 2 separate documents. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Thank you.
So the recent OECD review of Scottish education, Scottish curriculum, did suggest that we have lots of different bodies governing our system, and perhaps we look to streamline that. But that would be an example of that, different frameworks, but lots of similarities and crossovers. So. Did you enjoy hearing about Scottish head teachers today?
Yes, it's nice to sit here in Iceland and listen on a conference in Scotland and have this opportunity.
Yes, and these circumstances allow us these opportunities. It's very nice to have you. Colin and I spoke about the Scottish standards in Amsterdam, except we weren't in Amsterdam. We were also sitting at home, but we were speaking with Dutch colleagues back in March. So very nice to have you here this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you for your information. And as we have no standards for teachers and head teachers in Iceland yet, it's very informative for us. I'm working at a colleague in institution from Scottish education, so and we are making standards for teachers.
Yes, good. Well, the Scottish ones are exceptionally good, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, folks. Thank you again, just for your time and for your input.